Hey guys, thank you for joining us for another exciting episode of YOML. This is a spring break week episode, and I think we are one of our favorite book. Is this installment 2 of 5 of one of our favorite book, top 5 book, the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
So this is one of our 5-part reflections, one of our favorite books overall. And this particular reflection was something I learned from Thinking Fast and Slow about beware of the expert. I know you guys have both read this book, but you guys remember the sections of being beware of the expert kind of stuff from Thinking Fast and Slow, where they do a lot of studies and things like that with stocks or whatever, even medical stuff. Like the more expert you are in a field, it's basically flip a coin. If you had a monkey just picking random outcomes, I guess, in terms of who's better, who's worse. As you get to know something more and more, you start to narrow your focus in such a tiny little window. You forget all the other stuff around you. And then all of a sudden, like most of your predictions of all these so-called like experts, especially on things that are, wicked environments, not kind environments, like there's a lot of uncertainty around it, like markets or health or life in general or whatever it may be. The more abstract,
Which is
and the more wicked it
99%
is.
of everything.
Right.
Like there's only so small percentage of any kind of environment. Kind of environment means like there are very strict rules and structures, right? Like
Right.
a chess game. You invented a chess game because you say, hey, these are the rules, right? You play a football game, these are the rules. Those are kind of environment where everything has a rule, and the rule, we made it up. But everything else beyond that is always the dynamic, right?
So pretty much the rest of life.
We call it we call it wicked. And so that's what I'm saying, 99% of all environments are wicked environments.
Right. And the worse and the more wicked they are, the less you should ever trust somebody that thinks that they're an expert in that field in terms of just statistical, I guess, like probabilities of whether or not they're right or not. Like they're usually wrong. Or not, they're more wrong than they're right is the basis of the thing that I learned from Thinking Fast and Slow. How that made me reflect, I guess, on my own life. If I learned about that, is it made me think back to my life before Amelia and my life after Amelia. So before Amelia, I was well on my way to becoming what I would call an expert in my field. Sales and marketing is really what I've been doing this now for 15 years at a high level. And, I feel like people would consult with me. I did a lot of consulting with people all the time, whether it be my team, my employees. Hell, I even consulted with CEOs and things like that would reach out to me on LinkedIn and ask me about my background and could I help them? Or people would find me on pickmybrain.com or whatever it was, places like that, right? I thought I knew what I was doing and thought I was a pretty well-rounded becoming an expert in my field. And that was a part of my life plan going forward. And, however I decided to apply that. And then obviously everything, as we talked about many times in this journey, everything changed for me in like an instant, when Amelia was born and that 39 days that we spent with her. One of the biggest lessons that I learned immediately was that I don't know anything. Like everything that I thought that I had this big plan and I was moving toward some expert status in life. Here's my 10, 20, 30-year plan kind of thing that I would sit down and write out goals for and map out and all that other bullshit. I quickly realized it could really change in an instant. Life has a way of really humbling you that way and slapping you in the face and reminding you that you don't know shit. That was a huge slap in my face and wake up call for me. And then later on down the road of the Your Magical Learning journey, obviously came across this book. And it reminded me of the dangers of trying to be an expert. And the weird thing is it's a bit of a slippery slope, right? Being knocked back down to ground to -20 after Amelia passed away versus feeling like I was an expert before she came into my life. As this journey has gone on, we've learned a shitload of stuff, right? We've explored a lot of different topics. We've learned a lot about humanity, ourselves, and more. And I feel like I'm getting back into the point in time where I'm getting to be more and more of an expert on Chris Sears again. And I feel like I kind of know where my life is going. And I feel like I kind of have a direction. And I feel like I'm kind of starting to maybe figure things out a little bit every once in a while. And then I constantly have to remind myself of this kind of a concept of like, no, stop. Like you don't know shit. Like you don't know anything true. You and I say this all the time. It's one of our core values of club, and it could be the 1,001st day turkey tomorrow, right? And it's like this weird balancing act of life where we have this weird pull toward wanting to be an expert in everything, but then at the same time, like it's so easy to forget that you don't know anything in this world, So it's one of the things that I've strived to do on this journey, and I will continue to do it for forever and beyond to kind of maintain that balance. Is whenever I feel like I'm starting to figure shit out, like I go visit my daughter's grave every week on Sunday and remind myself like this is the other side of the equation, right? Of knocking you back down to zero, and it can happen anytime. Revisiting this journey, I love that we have these conversations every single day. I love that I get to read my own reflections and read and talk to you guys about this stuff, because it reminds me, this conversation will remind me to keep it in my head, like, hey, you don't know anything, like just keep pushing forward, but like remember that beginner's mindset. And then the third one is a quote from Beginner's Mind: if your mind is empty, it's always ready for anything. If it's open to, and it's open to everything. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. Knowing that there's so many unanswered questions in this world makes me feel so much more alive every day, you know. And when you think you know a lot of stuff, life becomes pretty fucking boring. So like I try to keep my balance between learning and wanting to learn and grow, at the same time also remember I don't know anything. Love to learn how you guys find balance between knowing and not knowing in your life. And what are your thoughts in general about the expert? Are you guys, how do you feel about that, I guess, concept?
Trio?
You want me to go first?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think now, like I said, this book is one of our top 5 books. And the reason why it's top 5 isn't because of how fun it is to read, but it has so much things that I can learn from it. And it's just packed full of things that, you know, of humanity, the way humanity is really how it behaves underneath, using our primitive minds and the modern mind, the system 1, system 2. And I think this is one of the things that people really, I guess, they take it for granted, for example, because a lot of the things we know in life, it's wicked. Meaning the only quote unquote wicked. I mean, I keep have to kind of rephrase this because, you know, a lot of people don't understand what I'm gonna say. The word wicked. Wicked just means it's dynamic and it's in flux all the time. That's the environment we're in. And when we are in this book, it says, you know, we're talking about it. So in this book, one of the, I guess one of the section is telling about the experts, right? In the book, they put up a platform for people to solve problems. It's called incentives, meaning they put out a bounty for people to solve problems. In the study they did, the majority of the people who are the solver of the problems or were never inside of the field. If they are an engineer problem, farmers would actually solve the problem. And it's always like, that's why they have this website called incentive. Basically they give you like prizes, money to solve problem, and anyone can list any problem that they want to solve, and especially in biology, in health, in whatever, they would actually post a questions, and most, like all of the answer, the problem solvers that get the most innovative solutions came from outside the field.
Yeah.
And so he basically said, hey, these are the evidence. I'm telling you why I'm saying, you know, don't trust expert, because expert, what we do is we have this bias. This bias is a confirmation bias. And the reason why it doesn't work is because when we start to look at something and we see there is some sort of a pattern, and we say, hey, you know, if I do this, it does this, right? And then over time, I say, you know, if I do this, I know what it does. So I have a confirmation. It was confirming to me before that doing ABC will affect XYZ. And that's the confirmation bias. So anytime I see ABC again and it does in this manner, I'm expecting it to behave just like I see before. But the problem is that we are in a wicked environment. So the saying that I love to say is, no man can step in the same river twice, right? What does that mean? And so to kind of simplify that, I say even Steve Jobs cannot repeat his success. Even Elon Musk cannot repeat his success. The reason for that is he was able to attain the perfect storm of criteria to make him a success. But now he is in a different time. His criteria has changed. And even then, the expert in that field is no longer expert. For example, if we're in sales, right? Let's say we're in sales in 1990. What the expert in sales, like, you know, we're looking at like Brian Tracy, a bunch of these guys. Right? These guys, like Ted Nicholas, right? These guys are expert in sales, but you ask them to be an expert in sales today, they suck at it, and the thing is they even worse than me, not knowing anything. The reason for that is because they have seen something that works in the past, and they will try to stay in that mindset. So this is why like any of the baby boomers in business, they are struggling to get sales today. The reason for that is they have learned the old techniques. The
Stop
old
learning.
techniques no longer works. For
Right.
example, postcard flyers. People don't read that anymore, right? And then in the 2000, right, we have emails, right? Emails work. Everybody's doing emails. You learn email marketing, but email has been becoming a problem, right? And so the problem is that things have changed. It's new. So when you're an expert in something, you held on to the past and you refuse to learn the new things. Therefore, a beginner is basically a beginner's mind because I don't have any confirmation bias to say, hey, I'm going to stick to this. So if anyone is trying to get your business by sending you a postcard, these guys are not making sales. That's why they go with like Salesforce CRM, they go with like HubSpot, they go with like Google ads, Facebook ad, right? TikTok ad.
Ironically, when you go back to the old school way of doing stuff, sometimes it's so old school that people actually appreciate it. Like, and they're like, "Oh my god, like you hand wrote me a note. Like, yeah, that's really nice."
I think that's BS.
No, it really does work.
It does not work, dude. Look, it does not work for
I,
me. It does not work.
I'm
But
saying that,
my
like, you know,
point is,
ironically,
my point is, Chris, when you say it works, right? That's the exception. I appreciate. So 1 out of 100, we say, yeah, I'll buy
I
you.
wouldn't do it all the time.
But that's
I didn't say,
not going to give you the sales that you need to make a living. So to me, that doesn't work in the general sense.
Wait,
Yes,
hang on.
somebody.
Now, like, being able to go back to that. That's all I was saying.
The point is, when you're an expert, you rely on that, and because you have seen it work in the past, you have confidence in it. So you're gonna go out there and you print 1,000 handwritten letters, right? How much time it would take you to get there, and what's the percentage of people gonna go and pick you as a business? It's very low. So in that sense, you're actually wasting more money. So your point isn't valid in this case.
Well, no, I meant like we can move on from this one
because you don't do it, Chris. You don't do handwritten letters to everybody.
That's when you do it. Change of pace. It disrupts what they're used to all day long.
Yes, but I'm saying
by the
you don't
stuff.
do it. You don't do it as the bulk of your process.
No.
My point exactly. That is like, hey, let me try something new. The bulk of the process is what? Hey, can I get you on the phone call? Can I go meet you and talk and see what kind of problem that you have that I can provide answers for? That's probably like 90% of all the stuff you do inside of your team, right? It's about like understanding the people's difficulties and find solutions for that difficulties. That's to me is 90% of all the thing that you do, right? Yeah. That's a gist of it. But if you're talking about, hey, I'm going to send a letter here and there, that isn't it. You're the expert in the new modern sales. You're the expert in the modern today's day. The expert in back then, they spend 90% of their time writing the handwritten letters. That's the difference.
They spend 90% of their time on the road, and
exactly.
going from place to place. But no, I get your point. No, I mean, definitely like time and place, and
but the thing is, I want to clarify that the reason why the expert isn't an expert is because they're an expert in something that's old, they're expert in something that no one longer uses, but they held on to it without letting it go. So the beginner's mind is actually better than having to hold on to something that you think works, but no longer works. That's why you have the beginner's luck, right? Beginner's luck is because you have beginner's mind. You just 50-50. That's why the monkeys actually have a better portfolio than the stock experts. Because the stock expert, what they do is because it is so dynamic, right? When they see a certain pattern, they take that pattern and say, hey, I'm gonna squeeze and narrow down this sample so that it fits this pattern. And the more you squeeze, the smaller of a pie size, of data that you can access to. So basically, everything else you have, you basically discard. You discard all the signals, all the data, because you say, hey, it has to fit this. You look at a stock pickers, right? Okay, I'm a technical analysis. I have to say, hey, it has to be above the 200-day moving average, or it has to be 50 days moving average crossing the 200-day moving average, or it has to be a Fibonacci retracement, or they have to be some kind of a trend line or whatever. They basically take some made up rules and trying to squeeze it in. So in the AI sense, we call this overfitting, right? You overfit everything. Basically, you make up your rules and you say, hey, these will have to fit. Otherwise, I'm not going to accept the data. I'm going to throw all the data away. And so basically, you end up with a smaller sample, and that's why it doesn't work. It's because you're trying to make a dynamic, quote unquote, wicked environment into a kind environment, which is rules and patterns, which doesn't work, doesn't exist. So this is why the book is so fascinating. It's because we take the opposite, right? Because we take something that we can't really understand and find patterns to, and then we trying to make it into a pattern, make it fit. That's why we categorize everything. There are a certain number of species or of certain animals that we kind of slice down to like 10 different categories, and then there's a whole massive plethora of other animals we just categorize into one grouping just because we don't have no idea what they are, right? So
Right.
same thing with with the race, right? You have like 2/3 of all the race on Earth is Asians. So we're like, so we group them into Asian, which 2/3 of the population, and then they 1/3 we split them up to like this kind, this kind, this kind, this kind. But that's the thing is we made up a lot of these rules. We're trying to find any kind of justification to put it in. So having an expert mind means that if you want to be an expert in something that is trending, it is new and not expire. If you're expert in something that has passed, then it actually going to detract from your ability to judge.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think those are all really good points. So do you have anything to add here?
There's a lot of ground covered in this whole book, and how do you find yourself between knowing and not knowing in your life? I just, think about True's point too, just how the human mind does love to categorize. And while True was talking, I was thinking about how the idea of attachment can cause suffering. So let's say you get attached to some idea, and clinging on to that can end up causing suffering. And so sometimes the ability to let go and, kind of, never stand in the room. You never stand in the room twice, same room twice. Just makes me think about how you need to kind of constantly be open to that. You don't know what the answer is, but you have to just be cognizant of the mind that you are going to try to want to funnel it down and answer it. We were at a nice restaurant, a little Mexican restaurant, and we were there with another family. And the guy, Larry Bloom, is a brilliant economic professor at Cornell, travels all over, advises a bunch of people. And he was like, gosh, I've been having the worst headache these past couple of days. And and his wife was like, well, Larry, if you just cleaned your glasses, you probably wouldn't have a headache anymore. And sure enough, he ended up cleaning his glasses. He was like, oh wow, I can finally see now. It's just like, how just very funny because there's this brilliant professor of economics or whatever, but can't figure out why the reason he has a headache.
Right. Yeah, it really blinds you to the rest of the world, like life, right?
So yeah, I mean, and yet I think this concept though, I think has its boundaries though. I don't think I'm going to be able to go become an NBA superstar overnight, or I think there is some skills with expertise that aren't as able to transverse work environments. But I like the example you talked about, let's say the farmer ended up solving the engineering problem, or sometimes just even in city council or town council meetings, you can have people who aren't politicians have great ideas to come up with solutions. So I do think it is good to be wary of experts, and yet, we all become experts in a little bit. I mean, that's what we're paid to do. I also, think usually for the most part, you become a better teacher with age though, as well. I would say I'm a much more efficient, and that's my own opinion though, but I would say I'm a much more efficient teacher now compared to, 4 years ago.
Well, I'm kind of curious why you think that is actually.
I guess just from my own abilities to see students absorb skills.
That's what made you better as a teacher?
No, that's how I see myself being a better teacher from my students' abilities.
I see. What do you do? Do you think you
teach less or more now? Differently.
How so?
I don't know, whether I've learned to do more checks for understandings, or just learn certain tactics, like in the classroom, like little tools and tool belt to make sure students are learning, or creating an environment that students want to learn in, an engaged classroom environment.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was hoping you would say. You ask a lot more questions, it sounds like, and you confirm and find new ways to take the feedback from the questions you're asking your students and how they're responding to stuff to try new things, right?
Yeah, but I would say that comes from experience now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I didn't say you can't be an expert in a field. There's a difference between being an expert and being an expert, in my opinion. Like, if you have an expert that you always want to constantly learn and try new things and tinker and be creative, like, that's the person that I'm saying that you want to be. That's the balance you want to find. It's fun. If you just went into teaching every single year and said, this is the lesson plan, I perfected it, here's what we do, and you just told your students that every single year, you'd be fucking bored, I'm sure. And B, you're an expert now. That's the bad expert, in my opinion. You can also become an expert by tinkering, by trying new things, by asking a lot of questions. But that's the balancing act between the two, where you're like, I don't know. I mean, maybe am I a good teacher? Maybe I'm not, but like, I can try new stuff, like, and I can do new things and I can explore, right?
Do you have a way to distinguish or categorize between the expert and the expert that, or I don't know what you want to call it.
I don't. It's like, that's what I was trying to say in this reflection is like, I mean, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in this entire journey is the truly amazing power of learning every single day, not just because of learning, but because of the fact that it's like the most addictive thing ever. And it makes time go so much faster. And everything is so much more fun and enjoyable when you're constantly trying to learn new things, no matter how much you know whatever you're doing. Before in my life, I felt like I was pretty bored. I felt like I knew my job pretty damn well. Yeah. And I was like, oh, here's what you want. You want to be able to achieve X, Y, Z, just do this, this, and this. It's like being a doctor. Here, take 5 pills and call me in the morning, whatever. Here's the prescription. I've solved this 500 times. Here you go. Be gone and come back to me whenever you want to. The boringness of knowing. And you guys remember that book, A More Beautiful Question, right? Where like kids just stop asking questions eventually at a certain point in time. Because at some point in time in your life, we like transition from not knowing anything to like apparently thinking that we know some shit, and I don't know, like that balancing point, like, is what I'm trying to say. That I
want to say that, yeah. Well, I think it is like the idea. I like the idea, at least for myself. It's just the idea of, you're not attached to a solution and you're open to new ideas. I think that's what creates the Zen expert in their field, is they are able to not be attached, and they're able to, I don't know, good leaders is they're able to be flexible in what they actually think is right. And so I think that can be challenging for the human mind to do, because we love to solidify and have a self-concept of who we are and what is, and it makes us
comfortable.
It's like a different way of being.
It's like secure. It's a security blanket. It's comfortable. We like that. I mean, that is something that we like, but we also like to be challenged, and we also like to explore, and we also like to learn new things. So I feel like for whatever weird reason, as we get older, the security and comfort becomes way more what we crave than the growing and learning and exploring and challenging. Yeah, it's weird.
And I think it kind of comes from
I think that comes from being conditioned, because if you condition yourself to be dynamic, you will be comfortable in being dynamic.
Right, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, but I wonder though too, is as we age, it's like, I mean, we don't have as much energy as when we're younger, so it is just like, I think it is like a natural.
I don't think so.
I mean, maybe it's like going to the gym. Maybe it's like if you keep working that muscle out, then yeah. But I think it's like, left to not going to the gym, then I do think one would naturally slide into that.
I ask as many questions now and learn more than I have since I was like 10 years old, and it's like invigorating. I feel the energy, it's energy sustaining all day long for me, and it doesn't get old. And that's the thing. There's no boringness about it. I think your point is a good point about the whole, if you exercise that muscle, especially in school, like this is your kids are incentivized to know. Like, you tell them something and then they're trained to say, I know this, right? I mean, am I wrong?
Or trained to say they know it?
Yeah, I mean, that's how they're incentivized. They're coached, they're trained, and they are tested for mastery on whether or not they know something or not.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, we are literally conditioned, like Drew was saying, to be the opposite of learning, free thinking.
Yeah. We're trained to know.
Right. So then when we start to get older, that's what we've been trained our whole life, is to know. So
to know. What a beautiful question. I mean, yeah, we've been trained to just kind of stop that inquiry a little bit.
Right.
And yeah, I think you're right. You guys are right. I think it is a conditioning of society, and just in terms of like, hey, here's societal structure, here's the monetary system, here's government, here's what it is, because structure creates a lot of security though for people. Like, we can't,
Because you're familiar.
well, it's
It comes from familiar.
and it's like, things need to function a certain way for, sometimes life to go on. Your mitochondria have to keep doing what mitochondria do, like they can't decide to, I'm gonna feel like I don't know, something different today.
That's the thing, is that there are certain things that is supposed to be dynamic, meaning they are not concrete, they're abstract. Like core values is abstract, meaning, because we talked about this before, when you are in a wicked environment, you cannot use the kind measuring stick to measure the results of whatever you want to measure in a wicked environment. You have to use a wicked tool.
Well, can you explain more what you and Chris mean by a wicked environment?
Chris, this is your terms.
Yeah. So, all right. So a kind environment, it's like basketball or chess, right? You have defined rules, and we create the rules as humans. Like, we're saying that a tennis court, you only have certain dimensions you can play in. There's only a certain amount of shots you can hit. There's only a certain amount of, ways you can play the game. There's only certain things that are off limits and on limit, like allowed, right? That's a kind environment. I can't be a professional basketball player because that's a kind environment. Yes, you are rewarded for being an expert, and Novak Djokovic is undoubtedly more expert in tennis than I am. And the more that he trains and knows, he will get better at that. But that's not how life works. Life is not a kind environment. Life is completely wicked. There is no, like,
there's
game
no
to be.
rules in a way. Yeah.
There's no set rules, right?
Everything can change. Like my whole life changed in literally the course of like one day, where everything is normal. I'm an expert in my
one
field.
minute. I mean, you say, well, Felicia's fine. She was her best friend. You decided to go work out. The moment you work out, it's like she calls you the moment you step into the gym.
Right.
So it's not even a day, it's a flip of a switch.
And everything changes, right? Everything that you cared about that you think is so important right now in your life, like finding love, or my mortgage payments, or your kids, your lesson plans for tomorrow, how am I going to teach them this year? It's completely irrelevant. It's never mattered.
Yeah, well, I think it must be something like it's just like short circuits to like your survival brain in terms of your genes and everything like that. I mean, it's just, I don't know.
Oh, no, I agree. I'm not advocating for people. I'm advocating for a balanced approach. Like the whole beginner's mind idea is a great idea. But if you literally walked around not knowing anything, it's like if you walked around, being completely rational all the time too, you would do nothing. You would never go anywhere because you couldn't, like, all the complex things that your body is doing. If you were trying to think about it, you would never actually move. Like your mouth would probably never even open to actually be able to,
this is what I'm saying is the thing is that it's knowing and there's not knowing, right? Because you say, well, I know that things are going to change. That's something good to know. Right. And then you say, well, the thing that's going to change, I don't know what's going to change. So when you look at those two things I'm asking, things are going to change. I don't know what's going to change. Right. So those things, that's why this is dynamic, right? A dynamic object, a dynamic concept, a dynamic abstract is usable in a dynamic world. But you cannot take something that is in a kind environment and measure it in a wicked environment, because it always adjusting, just like the river. Like it's always different at every single second, right? No man can step in the same river twice, because the river is not the same river, and the man is not the same man. He's a different man. The river is different because the water has completely flowed through, and it's a new water that came through. And so in this environment, so we have to focus on the abstract and more dynamic concepts like core values or things that we know don't change. So when we are an expert or something, what can we rely on to say, hey, is this something we can rely on? We know something is going to change. Therefore, what we don't know is what things are going to change and how much are going to change. So we're not going to take that into consideration in terms of our decision-making skills. We say, well, if it's not going to change, therefore, I'm not going to be held back by something that I thought would work in the past. Because that will actually determine from making a good educated guess at where it's going to be, if I were to guess at it or project at it.
I mean, it's like fighting fire with nature. I mean, really is what you're saying. Nature plays a different game than what humans play. Humans like to play a safe, comfortable, knowing, wicked game. Like we love sports. Like there's a reason why we love sports so much, because it's fun. We love to see mastery. We love to see excellence. We love to see, like people that really do everything that they possibly can like that's a unique human thing, right? I mean, you don't see dogs playing a game of baseball over there, you know, or something like that, where
It's your
like,
friend's 10-year-old training to be an NBA player.
right, exactly. You're like, what are you talking about? Like, why you're going to dedicate your whole life to this? Like when you're 10, anyway, but no, like we love these things. Like this is stuff that just like is a uniquely human, you know, idea of wanting to recognize patterns and to put them into things where we feel like we're making progress. Like
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, I think it's this idea that like we love this, like, I don't know, perfection, or we love this craft, you know, that sometimes it's not necessarily sometimes even a building up. It's sort of like a chipping away, and just like having someone just focus just on one thing and seeing what they can create in that.
yeah, but like, I mean,
There's so
that's
many things
great.
that you can do in life. Yeah, it is. No, that is great. It is great. It's neat. It's unique, and that's like where a lot of like art and expertise, I think, comes from.
Right.
It's beautiful, you know, but it can also be suffering in that, whether you're Andre Agassi or something like that, you know, you can also be suffering a lot. So I don't know.
Well, actually, art is a, you know, I guess what we call art, you know, like painting and writing and movies or whatever, cinema, like the Oscars were last night, right? You know, like that's so subjective into what people like think is good or not good, because there is no, that's a wicked environment, right? Like, you know, artistry is like painting is a wicked environment. What is good? What is not good? Who the fuck knows? Like you just know it when you see it, or you don't know it when you don't see it. But like it's a moving target at all times. Like you know, it's abstract. Like, you know, what's a good movie? I don't know. It's totally abstract. I either liked it or I didn't like it. It made me feel good or it didn't make me feel good. It made me, you know, it got emotions out of me or it didn't get emotions out of me, you know, and like, and that's life, you know.
That's the point though. We think about if we understand that, let's say let's take a simplified example, right? Let's say we're going to shoot an arrow at a target, right? And if a target is stationary, that's what we are expecting. And we say, hey, I'm going to shoot at this direction, at this place, at this wind or whatever. Then it's, you know, it's going to happen all the time. But then you understand that, hey, you know, the world is not like a stationary target. It's going to be a moving target. And then you have to count in, like, okay, how fast are they moving? Okay, what direction they're moving? Are they going to be wind involved? How far they are, that calculates the wind, and then whether or not you are leading the target enough, and then you add in those formula. Somebody has able to craft the art of actually shooting the arrow and hitting the target while the target is moving at some wind. So once you understand more dynamic rules, you can compensate for some of these things and even be able to achieve it. But if you don't understand the dynamics of the, like, hey, the target's moving, you keep shooting at it, and then when it's moving, you're gonna miss 100% of the time, even though you're an expert at shooting at a stationary target.
It's
right?
a dynamic
So that
game.
too, right? In the target example, I'll give you just one example. It's just moving in one direction. Then let's say you're going to say, well, it's moving in multiple directions, backward, forward, upward, downward, for, you know, to the multiple dimension. Then you have to take in these variables. Then eventually somebody will eventually figure out how to create an art to shoot the target, even if it's moving in those multi dimensions. But if you never ever consider that it is moving, you will always miss because you're shooting at a stationary target. That's why we say, hey, be caution of the quote unquote expert, because the thing expert is the meaning, hey, doesn't mean that you don't know anything. It's just, hey, there are certain things you should know, and there's certain things.
Yeah, I agree. It's a fun topic. This is why we love this book. It's always a thinker. It's always something you can have a lot of fun discussions around. Any final thoughts for the night?
Attached to ideas and not open to things, not open to other ideas or things, because it does sort of makes the world and your life limited. And I think there's a beauty in what it's like, yeah, being open to other ideas and to not knowing.
I love that. But I would ask, is the idea of not knowing an idea?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is.
So you're attached to it.
But don't get
I'm kidding.
Well, a point though. I mean, in a wicked environment, I mean, what is isn't. What isn't is. Right?
Yeah, I was just kidding, but yeah, I mean,
having no idea is an idea, right? Having no plan is a plan.
that's what I was joking about, but I know what you're saying, Snow. I was just being a dick.
Stop it.
True.
Yeah, I think we need to have this empty mind, right? So to me, approach everything with an open mind, meaning let anything be anything and not be, fixed on this is the outcome that I'm going to want to see. Let it be what it be and just take it as is without having an opinion on it before it happens. Because if you do, the only thing it's going to do for you is going to shift your perspective on it.
I love both the thoughts. I think mine is being an expert's boring as fuck. I mean, it's just boring. I don't want my life to be boring. Not only that, it's being an expert's anxiety riddled. It's frustrating because you're always fighting with people, telling them why they're wrong. It's like anti-human. It's boring. It's monotonous.
And it's stressful. Because
stressful.
like you're going to say, well, that's not right. And then they're going to say, no, what do you mean? You get into this anxiety, self-inflicted.
And I think it can be tough though, just like whether you have a son or a daughter, like, no, I don't want you to be drinking and smoking, and that can be hard to get attached to. Sometimes things are easier to conceptually live by than it's like when life actually ends up calling or knocking on your door, it can be difficult.
I totally agree with you. I've thought a lot about this because like with children, understanding these are not just ideas, these are ways that I live my life at this point in time. I don't want to ever tell my son what to do or my daughter what to do or my future children what to do. I want to give them the freedom to choose. I want to give them the freedom to explore and find their own solutions and find their own answers. But at the same time, if I know that the answer, that what they're going down the road to do is it's a really tough situation. I mean, I don't disagree with you at all. I can't knowingly put my children in harm's way, but at the same time, who's to say that I've put it in harm's way by, like the adversity hypothesis, like sometimes the biggest trials in your life are the things you learn the most from, right? I mean, then I'm depriving them of all the joy that I'm talking about. It is really tough. I don't know. It's a good question, Snow. Like, what would you do?
Me? I don't know. I don't have kids yet. I'm going to think about that.
I mean, it's a tough one. All right. Well, we could wrap there, though. That was a fun discussion, as always. And the question we can leave for everyone else is, how do you find balance between knowing and not knowing in your life? And looking forward to seeing y'all tomorrow.